In this video, we are going to see how you can build really professional looking and responsive tables in Bubble like this one. Before we start, I just wanted to let you know that if you want to save time and not do everything by yourself, you can check Nocodable Components UI library. This is my library. We have a bit more than 350 fully responsive components. Among them, you have a selection of tables that you can simply copy and paste into your Bubble apps, just like this. So if you want to take a look at this library, this is optional, but you can find a link to it in the description of this video. All right, so before diving into Bubble, let's take a look on Figma at what we want to achieve, what we want to create. So as we can see on the screen, we have this nice little table, which is really professional looking. It has a nice, neat UI, but it is not that complicated. So it's a classic table that you will find in a lot of apps. So basically, we have two main components, which are the header of the table. So this part here, where we are going to display the titles of the columns. And then we have the repeating cells, the repeating rows at least, which is this part. So actually in Bubble, we are going to do this only once, and then it will repeat in our table. So let's get started and let's dive into Bubble. So we are going to create a new page, and then we are going to create our table. So into Bubble, I'm going to start by creating a new page. If you already have a page on which you want to add your table, obviously select this page, but I'm going to create a new one. And there we go. I'm going to start by adding a layout to my page so that it becomes responsive. And I'm also going to add a wrapper container around my table so that I can space it a little bit more easily. So I'm going to add some padding into it. This is optional, this is just for me because I'm on a new page. If you already have a page layout, don't do this. So, right. To build our table, we are going to use a repeating group and not the table element that Bubble gives us, because the table element, as it mentioned here, is still in a beta phase and Bubble doesn't really update it anymore. So we are going to focus on repeating group because the table component itself still lacks a lot of features and is still a bit limited depending on what you want to do. So for simple tables, it could be fine, but for more complex ones that you may be needing in the future, you are going to need to know how to create tables with a repeating group. So that's why we are going to use a repeating group in this case. So let's start by adding a repeating group to our page. In this case, we are going to use a repeating group because this gives us more flexibility than the table element, which is still in beta and that Bubble doesn't update really anymore. So the table element will be fine for simple use cases when you build a really simple table, but in most cases you are going to need the repeating group because it will allow more flexibility, especially in terms of pagination, of layout, etc. So in this case we are going to learn how to make tables using repeating groups because that's the most complicated aspect in building tables, and once you master that you can really build any type of tables, whereas with the table element you are going to be limited. So that's why we are going to focus on repeating groups for now. So first I'm going to rename my repeating group, so let's name it repeating group table, for example. I'm going to uncheck fit width to content so that it takes the full width of the container it is in. I'm going to keep the min height just for now, just now that we are in the editor, just to have a bit more view of what we are doing. And I'm going to uncheck fixed number of rows for now. I don't need any separator for now. Now at least we are going to do this later when we will modify the appearance. I'm just going to select my type of content. So in this case, I'm going to display invoices. So I have a data type invoices in my app that you can see here. I have a few data fields into it. So customer picture, date, number, purchase, etc. So now I can select my data source, which in this case will be a do search for, and I'm going to make a very simple search without any constraint, and I'm going to retrieve all my invoices because in my app I only have 4, just for illustration purposes. All right, so I have my repeating group, we have the data. Now we can move on and actually start to build our table. So let's go back to our Figma very quickly, just to see how many columns we are going to need in this table. So as we can see, we are going to need 6 columns. So one for the invoice number, the date, the status, the customer, and the purchase, and also one more column for the actions that we have here, so the archive and download action. So what we are going to do is that we are going to add our first repeating row. So this will be the whole line, which will be the template line that will repeat itself depending on the number of data you are going to show. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add a group into my repeating group. I'm going to call it, for example, repeating row. You can name it however you want. It doesn't really matter in that case. It's up to you. So now we have our repeating row. We are going to style it a bit. So I'm going to add some padding top, bottom, and probably some left padding as well. As we can see, we have some left padding. So if I check in the Figma, I have 24, 16, and that's pretty much the case for everything. So we are going to add some padding left and right, and we are going to add some gap between each cell. So let's add some padding left and right, so 24 and 24 as well. And we are going to add some gap between columns. So this is the column in the repeating row, and we are going to add some 24 as well. I'm going to set it, to row, so that the element will be placed next to each other horizontally. So column gap 24. All right. So if we take a look at our Figma once again, you can see that the first group that we are going to have is the group containing the checkbox and the invoice number. So actually what we can do is to create a whole column for the checkbox. So we are going to use an icon for that. I'm going to add an icon for the checkbox. There we go. I'm going to take the in phosphor, I think it's called square. There we go, have it here. And this way we have our checkbox. So I'm going to remove the padding that Bubble sets by default on checkboxes. I'm going to make it 24 by 24, and I'm going to see what color their charbox, so DOD 5DD. I'm going to use actually a style variable that I have on my app. I do not, okay. So I'm going to use this color, there we go. So now we have our checkbox. So this will be our first column, and now I can go ahead and add a text next to it, which will be the invoice number. So let's add a placeholder value for now, and then we will make everything dynamic in a second time. Right, so I have my text. I'm going to center it vertically. And there we go. I'm going to do the same on the checkbox so that they are centered. And I'm going to, very important, not on the checkbox, because the checkbox will always be the same width, but on text element and groups element inside the table, you will want to uncheck fit width to content. We are going to come back to this later, but let's do this for now. And I'm just going to check in the Figma what is the font size. So this is 14 pixel, medium, and it's in black like this. So I have already some styles in my app, so I'm going to select 14 pt black 500 medium. And there we go. So I have my invoice number, I have my checkbox. What do I need next? I need a date, which this time will be in gray. So I'm going to add it, I'm going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to select 14 pt gray 500 medium, and I'm going to add a placeholder date. There we go, just like that. All right, so we have another column. Now, a bit trickier one is this one. Basically, in Bubble, we are going to need to wrap this into a container just so that we can contain, control the amount of space that we are wanting next to this chip, to this badge. So we are going to create this badge, and then we are going to add a group around it, just so that we control the spacing next to this group. So I'm going to add a first group, which will be our badge. I'm going to put it, there we go. So I'm going to set it to fit width to content. I'm going to add some padding, usually for badges it should be 10, 4 and 4. We will come back to this later. I'm going to make it last. I'm going to center it vertically, so that it is centered in my cell. I'm going to rename it badge status, and I'm going to add some roundness to it and a background as well. I'm just going to get the color from the Figma Design. So if we take a look at this, I'm just going to select it. So the fill color is this one. So I'm going to set it to this. So as we can see, we have our thing here. I'm going to copy this text to paste it into my group. I'm going to say that for now it is paid. So as you can see, I'm going to check the fit width to content on the text, just so that it really takes only the space it should take. And I'm going to remove the min height that I have on this group. There we go. And now I'm going to add an icon next to my text. I'm going to say check. I'm going to select bold in phosphor, I like this. I'm going to get the color of the icon, which is success 500. I'm going to up. There we go. I copied it. And I'm going to paste it here. Alright, once again, I'm going to remove the padding from the icon. And I'm going to put it in 18 by 18, which should be, I think, a good size. Alright, so right now, my elements in my badge are not positioned correctly, so I'm going to set it to row, so that they are next to each other. I'm going to add some gap as well between those two. Let's say 6 pixels. And now I can take a look at the font size and color. So I'm going to copy the color. And you can see that it's 12 pixels in size and it's medium. So let's select 12 pixels black medium, and I'm going to simply modify the color. Whoops. And there we go. I find it a little too small, so I'm going to keep 14 for now. And that should do it. All right. So right now we can see that we have our badge status that is alone in this cell. And basically, since it's alone and it is in fit width to content, it gets pushed to the far right of the group, to the far right of the cell. So we don't want that. What we are going to do is that we are going to group this element in a row or column container, whatever. I'm going to select row because why not? I'm going to remove the min height, and we can see that as soon as we put this group in another group, the outer group will expand, and therefore the badge will get pushed to the left of the group, and bubble will space out everything evenly. So that's what we want in a table actually. So that's why this type of groups, you will need to group them in another container to really control the spacing of them. So I'm going to say badge container, and there we go. So this one is done. We can move on to the customer. So basically, this is one group that will contain on the left of this group the picture, and another group that will contain the two text elements. But once again, we will have an outer group that will space everything evenly. So let's add a new group in our table. I'm going to add it here. I'm going to rename it customer info. And since I want the profile picture of the customer and the text information of the customer, so its name and its job title, I'm going to select a row. I'm going to add some gap between the two of them. Then I'm going to center this group vertically. So now I can add my image in my group customer info. I'm going to set it to fixed width and keep element aspect ratio fixed, and I think it should be 48 or 64, I don't know. I'm just going to check that. 32, okay. 32, and I'm going to round it. I'm going to up, there we go. And I'm just going to put a static image for now. I have a few of them, just so that we can visualize, and then we will add some dynamic data into it. Now, on my group customer info, I'm just gonna center vertically the image inside of my group, and then I can remove the min height of this group so that it will shrink as much as possible depending on its content. Now, I can go ahead and add a first text. So I'm going to copy this one and I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to say Jane Doe for now. Then I can take a look here. So it's regular 14 and in black. So 14 PT black. So I don't have the same font. I think I'm in Open Sans here. So I'm going to put it in medium because I think it's it's better looking. And then I can duplicate it, and here will be jane.doe@gmail.com. So I have my two texts. I'm just going to put it in gray, the second one, gray regular. Now I can select the two of them using click, shift, and another click, and now I can group them into a column container so that these two texts will be on top of each other. And there we go. So I'm just going to hit previous on this one so that it go up, and there we go. Now we have our customer info group. There. All right, so that's it for this. Let's move on to the next column. So this is a simple text, so we can basically duplicate this one. So I'm going to hit Command plus D, or Control plus D if you're on the Windows. There we go. We can see that we have some layout issue for now. We are going to cover this a bit later, which is when we are going to make the table responsive, just so that this doesn't happen. If you want the email not to be able to go on the second line, what you can do is simply add a max height on the text element, and Bubble will understand that it needs to cut this text element and add some dots at the end of it. So that's one way to handle that. So this next one is actually the purchase, so monthly subscription. There we go. And now the last column we need is those two texts, so the archive and download option. So basically that's one column. We're going to create a group in which we are going to add those two text buttons, and this will act as a single column. So let's add our first text element. So I'm going to duplicate this one. I'm going to rename it archive. I'm going to actually add a second one, which will be download. I'm going to change the color of download. Let's say in blue. There we go. And now I can go ahead and select the two texts, hit group element in row container, and there we have our group actions. What I'm going to do is that I'm just going to hit fit width to content on these two texts. I'm going to add some gap between them, so let's say 8. And I'm going to fit width to content in this group, because this group will not change its width based on its content. It will always stay the same width, and it will always be on the right of the table. So in this case, I want to fit width to content so that it is constrained, to be as small as possible, so that it is always on the right side of the table. Now I can remove my min height, and there we go. We have our group actions. So basically, we have all our columns. If we take a look and hit preview, you can see that I have my columns. We just need to make some adjustment in terms of width and spacing, etc., but that will come later. But basically, that's it. So now that we have the basic structure of our table, what we can do is work a bit on how each element are spaced inside our table, because right now it's a bit of a mess. As you can see, one important information in this case will be the customer, which is currently quite small. The paid tag, however, has a lot of spacing here that we don't really need. Same for the invoice number, which has a lot of spacing here, and the date as well. So we are going to work on that. We're going to give some more space to our customer information, which is an important information, and make sure that everything is behaving correctly. So how do we do that? In Bubble in tables, we are going to use the min width, because this will affect the space the elements are allowed to take in a group, in a container. So if we take a look, the higher the min width compared to other element is, the bigger the element will be in terms of spacing. So if I go ahead and hit and select an 80 pixel min width on my invoice number, we can see that right now it's taking more space because other elements have a small min width. So what we want to do here is to constrain the element first in max width, because the invoice number don't need to expand a lot. So I'm going to add a small min width on this, like 10, and I'm going to add a max width of, let's say, 70 pixels. So right now, it won't take as much space as before. Same for the date. The date is more or less always the same width, depending on the characters of the date, etc. But we can add a max width of, for example, 90 pixels. let's say 100, and 10 pixels of min width. Same for the status badge. We can constrain it, let's say 140 pixels, maybe. This is still a bit too big. Let's say 130, all right? And we are going to add the same min width here, which is 10. And then we have the customer information, which is a pretty important one, and one that can take a lot of space because an email address could be quite long. So we are going to increase the min width of this element. So let's say 180, just so that it can take a bit more space. And same for the monthly subscription. This needs to take a bit of space as well because the purchase name could be longer. So let's say that I'm going to add a 100 pixel min width. There we go. And this one, it won't move because it is in fit width to content with the two text inside of it, fit width to content. So it will take only the space it needs. So if we go back to our other tab and refresh our tab, we can see that everything is behaving a bit better, that we have a better spacing and a nice and more coherent table. So now that we have the first version of our table and that everything is placed a bit more coherently, we can move on and start building the header of our table. So the header basically is a group that will only be visible on the first line of our table. That's the trick when building a table with a repeating group in Bubble, is that we are going to use a conditional that makes it visible only when we are on the first line. But in theory, it will repeat everywhere in the table. This is why we are going to need a conditional. Other thing a bit tricky as well to understand is that every element for the column, in order to be aligned correctly, needs to have the same min width and max width than the elements inside the column. So for example, on the date, if we put 100 pixel min width and 120 pixels max width, we are going to need the exact same min width and max width in our column header, just to make sure that everything is aligned perfectly. So that's what we are going to do. So first we are going to add a group with our background color, so this little gray, so this field F9 FB. So in our repeating group in our editor, we can collapse this one, and we can add another group inside our table, which will be group table header. I'm going to add my background color so that we can see what we are doing. There we go. So as you can see, it is repeating now. We have this one once here, we have this another time again in the second line. This is why we are going to add a conditional later to make sure that it only appears once in our table. But right now this is normal, this is fine. I'm going to go into my table header. So as I was saying earlier, everything needs to be aligned perfectly. So in our repeating row, we added earlier a padding left and right. So we are going to make it identical in our header. So padding left, padding right. I'm going to add some padding top and bottom. This one will not affect the alignment. And now what I can do is simply, for my icon, I can copy it using Ctrl C. There we go. Same for my text here, I can copy it. Sorry, I forgot to put it in a row. And same as under there, I'm going to add a 24 pixels of gap. So 24, there we go. Now I can add a number. Same for the date, so I can duplicate it. I'm going to add date. So this needs to have the same min width and max width as the date element that we have here. So 10 and 100. So 10 and 100. This way it will be aligned. This one up, there we go. For the status, needs to have the same min and max width than the container containing the status. So 10 and 130. 130, there we go. Same for the customer. We are going to need 180 pixel. So customer 180, and I'm going to remove the max width. There we go. For the monthly subscription, we are going to need 100 of min width. 100. And for the actions here, we are going to need to use the same, the exact same width. So this one is fixed because we checked fit width to content and the text are static. So we can see here that it is 127 pixels. So what I can do is simply add a group, just so that it is not visible because this column doesn't have a title. I'm going to make it 127 pixels in width, and I'm going to remove the min height. There we go. And I'm going to call it group spacer. And there we go. Everything now is aligned correctly. So as we can see, we need a bigger min width on this table, on this date, sorry. So I'm going to add an 80 pixel of min width, and I'm going to obviously add it here. So 80 pixels. This one, same, it needs to be a little bit more width. So I'm going to add some min width around here. There we go. So let's say 75 for the badge. Nice. This we won't need to actually add it into this one because the badge container here, sorry, I have to add it on this one, not this one. Up, there we go. So I added the min width on the badge container, which is the outer container of this badge, and now I need to add it also on the column title, so 80 pixels. There we go. And now we can see that everything is more or less aligned correctly. Now I need to correct this with some min width as well for the text. So let's say 50. So I need to add it here as well, 50. Date, everything is aligned. There we go, there we go. And this one, I had 100 of min width, which doesn't seem to be enough. So let's say 150 maybe. Yep. And now I can add it here as well. There we go. So let's go to the preview of our table. And what we are going to see right now is that our header is repeating. That's what we were saying earlier. So in order to make sure that this header only appears once, we are going to select our header group. We are going to uncheck visible on page load. So this will be hidden by default. You are going to make sure that the checkbox collapse when hidden is checked. This will make sure that when this group is hidden, it doesn't take any space. And now we are going to add a condition saying that when current cell is indexed, so the index in a repeating group or in a table is the number, the line number. So if you're on the second line of the table, the index will be 2. Current cell index is 1, and we're going to check this element is visible. So the header will only appear once, only when it is on the first line of the repeating group. So if we go back to our preview, we can refresh the page, and we can see that now we have something that looks a bit more like a table with proper header and proper column titles. So now that we have our header with our column titles and our repeating row, we can focus on actually making this table responsive before moving on to injected dynamic data and styling it a bit. How do we make a table responsive? Well, basically, the easiest and most common way to do this, especially for this type of table, is to make the table scrollable horizontally. So to provide the user with the ability to scroll inside the table to see all the information the table has to show. So if we take a look at the responsive view in Bubble, we can see that if I decrease the screen size, right now the table is a mess because everything will react responsively. So basically everything will go back to the next line when it doesn't have the space to be next to each other. So that's basically how the responsive in Bubble works. So how do we work on that? Basically, we need the content inside of the repeating group to be bigger than the repeating group itself, so that the repeating group enters the scroll mode, basically. So when the content inside of the repeating group starts to get bigger than the actual repeating group, then the user will have the ability to scroll inside the repeating group. So what we can do, it's pretty easy, is to simply add a min width high enough so that the user can start to scroll when it needs to. So if we take a look here, we can see that on the left bottom of my screen, I have the page width, which is here, the parent container, and the element. So the element actually is my header, the gray part, and the page itself here is 1000 pixels. So if I start to go down a bit, we can see that right now, at this point, things are going bad. basically, so under 1000 pixels. So what I can do, we can see that the element now is 900 pixels of width, so below that, things are going to get bad. So what I can do is simply add a min width to make sure that this doesn't happen. So meaning that this element shouldn't be less than 900 pixels in this case. So if we take a bit of margin, we can say that the min width of this will be 950, and we need to make sure that this min width is identical with the repeating group. So min width 950, and if we take a look at this now, we can see that now it is getting truncated, which indicates that now this table is scrollable. It won't show in bubble responsive tab, but if we take a look at this, I'm going to inspect it with Chrome debugger element. There we go. We can see that when I shrink the screen, right now, I can see a scroll bar appearing, and I can scroll inside the table, and everything is behaving correctly, and the information remains visible on any screen size. If I go and do this, so right now we have the debugger, so it's doing a bit, but the smaller the screen gets, and the table continues to behave responsively, and the data is still accessible to our user, which is what we want. So we have our table is now responsive. What we need to do now is to inject data in our table. We already started doing that when we selected a type of content and a data source on our table. Now we need to make sure that this data will actually go from the table to each element in our table. So the number, the invoice number in this case, needs to go from the table where it is retrieved to the text element that will actually display it. So how do we do this? We need to make sure one thing is that the data can go from the table element itself, here, all the way down to each group and all the way down to each element. And the data needs to flow into each element. So right now we have a barrier that is the group repeating row. So we are going to need to add the type of content to this group. In my case, this is an invoice, but it could be any data type in your app. And we are going to select the current sales invoice. So basically, that's the invoice currently displayed in this particular cell, in this particular row or line. So I'm going to select this, and this will allow me in elements, just under this group, to select the parent group invoice. So the invoice currently displayed in this line. I'm going to select it, and now I can choose what data field I want to show. So in my case, it's the number. And I can add a canvas placeholder just so I can see it in the editor. And I can do the same thing with the date. Parents group invoice date, formatted as this one, let's say. So 5/05/2025. And now I can do the same with the status, the customer, etc. But there is one small trick, is that on the page here for the status, I have another group which is creating a barrier between the element showing the data field and the parent group. So what I need to do is that I need to select an invoice in type of content in this badge, in this group, sorry. I need to select a data source, which is the parent group invoice. And I need to do the same thing here for the group badge statue, invoice, parent group invoice. And now, in my text, I can access the parent group invoice. And I don't have the field created, so I'm going to create one status, which is an option set invoice status. There we go. And now I can select my data field, so parent group invoice status, and I can select the display because this is an option set. But basically, this will display paid, refunded, etc. And now I can do the same thing for the customer. So once again, in the group that is between the data and the element displaying the data, I need to add an invoice, parent group invoice. Now, in this case, I can select parent group invoice customer picture, which is a data type image. And now, same for the text. If I try to do it here, I can see that the parent group is a parent group thing, which indicates that the parent group, so the container just above this element, doesn't have a type of content selected. So what I can do is just go into the element tree. I have my text here selected, and I can see that I have the group F, which is the group containing my two text elements, that doesn't have any type of content and any data source. So I can add invoice, parents group invoice, and now if I go back to my text, I can see that now I have parents group invoice, and I can select customer. Same for here. I don't have an email type for here, so I will not add it. I'm just going to add some canvas placeholder, but this will be the same. You can use parents group invoice, customer, email, etc., etc. Just going to go back a bit. There we go. Now, same for this purchase column. I can go ahead. This is a standalone text. There isn't any group on top of it which is separated from the data, so I can simply go ahead, parents group invoice, and purchase. And there we go. So now I can add a canvas placeholder. This is simply for me in the editor to have some placeholder data. And now if I go back to the preview of my element, for now, since I didn't refresh yet, we can see that we still have the placeholder data that repeats itself. But when I refresh, we can see that now I have actually different data. So I have the invoice number, the date, etc., etc. I don't have any status because my invoice don't have any status. So I'm going to check that, app data, invoice. I'm going to select status here, paid. Oops, paid. Paid and paid again. There we go. And if I go back to my preview, we can see that now I have the status. There we go. What we can see as well is that we have a small responsive issue here, so we need to make this column a little bit wider in order to accommodate for the larger invoice numbers. So how do we do that? Well, simply we are going to make this min width a little bit bigger. I only have 50 now, which doesn't seem to be enough, so I'm going to add 80 pixels, and I'm going to increase a little bit as well the max width, so 80 and 120. And I need to make this same operation on the column title, so 80 and 120. This should solve the issue. If you take a look, number, and now I have my column behaving correctly. And there you go. Now you know how to create tables in Bubble. All you need to do now is to style a little bit the table depending on what you want to achieve. But your table is responsive. You know how to send dynamic data into these tables. Basically, you know how to make tables in Bubble. I hope you liked this video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe and to like. And if you want to check out Nocodable Components UI library, you will find a link to it in the description. I hope you like it. See you!